Howdy, cowboys. I don't know. I'm still working on an intro. Yeah. Anyway, well, welcome back, everybody. This is Mr. Ancharsky, AP World History, Unit 0, Chapter 4, Rome. We're going to talk about the rise of ancient Rome and, more importantly for us later on, the decline of ancient Rome. So your bellwork is on the screen, and it's asking you to do a skill that we will frequently talk about in this class, and that's identifying two things called continuity and change. Continuity, what's staying the same? Change, self-explanatory. What is changing? So in this question, you are supposed to identify a thing that's staying the same between the classical era and the Hellenistic period, and something that's changing from the classical era to the Hellenistic period. Mein Gott. All right. Well, yes, today we're going to talk about Rome, and specifically what I want you to pay attention to is how did government evolve over time in ancient Rome? And especially, let's consider the legacy politically of ancient Rome. Well, before we do that, let's look at geography and how that impacts developments. Because as we're going to see in a second, geography is going to be a major part in distinguishing class distinctions in ancient Rome. But let's look at what Rome looks like. Let's look at the little peninsula known as Italy. Well, Italy, and by extension, the city of Rome, is a great spot in terms of a lot of things. For one thing, Rome is located on a river called the Tiber River, the city of Rome on the Tiber River. And the Tiber River has access to the Mediterranean Sea. So there is going to be kind of a unique advantage to that. For one thing, Rome can participate in the emerging Mediterranean Sea economy. But Rome is also pretty well defended, for the most part, because it is further away from the coast. There's no risk of a seaborne invasion. So we are going to have a pretty great starting location, a pretty great spawn point, if you will, for the Roman Empire. Well, first the Roman Republic, then the Roman Empire. We also have a pretty good spot in terms of natural resources. There's lumber in order to grow, there's lumber in order to build up cities. This lumber primarily coming from the north of Italy, but there's also snow in the Alps of Italy. And why is that important? Well, snow melts, in case you didn't know. But when snow melts, we are going to see the Romans building structures called aqueducts to bring all of this water, this nice fresh water, down into their urban environments. So there's going to be clean water in ancient Rome, as we'll talk about. But there's also pretty good climate in terms of agriculture. Rome, it can get hot in the summertime, but for the most part, it's pretty good agricultural territory. And as a result of this importance of farming, we are going to see the social importance and economic importance of land ownership. Who has the biggest farms? And as such, that's going to impact class developments. And we're going to see the rise of two distinct classes. There's the patricians. These are the biggest landowners. These are people who have special privileges in Roman society because they are born into the patrician class. And they are going to be the ones who largely direct political developments throughout Roman history, both in the Republic and in the Empire. And below them is the plebeian class. The plebeians, they can own a lot of land, they can have a lot of money, except they don't have those privileges guaranteed by birth that the patricians have. So we're seeing a class distinction based on tradition and birth. The patricians, they are born into places of privilege purely based on their family's title, that they belong to the patrician class. Well, that's not necessarily guaranteed to plebeians. And that's going to have major political ramifications, as we're going to see in a second. But how did the city of Rome form? How did we start to see a civilization that will have major impacts in the future? Well, if we want to look at mythology, there's these two orphan brothers. I don't remember why they're orphaned, and it doesn't matter for our class, but the legend goes that they're raised by a wolf or something, and then Eventually, I think they kill their dad. It doesn't matter. But anyway, they found apparently a city known as Rome, named after, of course, Remus. No, it's named after Romulus. And Romulus is supposedly to become the first king of ancient Rome, but this is a history class, none of that matters. What probably happened is that a bunch of farmers noticed, this is a pretty good spot to live. Let's settle here. And that's what they did. So we are going to see a farming-based society form around 1000 BCE. And as I mentioned before, they're going to create a class hierarchy based on birth privilege and based on land ownership. Initially, we do see Rome as kind of just a city-state, is ruled over by a monarch. However, the monarchs in this pre-republic phase of Roman history, they gradually over time become very corrupt, very tyrannical. So we are going to see an unpopularity of monarchy in Roman tradition. And to combat this monarchy, the elites of Roman society, the patricians, they're going to stage a rebellion, and they're going to overthrow the king, and they're going to say, okay, it's bad that we had one person in charge, but we as a class, we as a patrician class, we know what's best. So we should kind of divide that responsibility among the most elite members of our class. And we are going to see the creation of the Roman Republic. And a republic in general describes a type of government in which we have elected officials who make laws on behalf of everybody in a community. This is different from a democracy in which everyone, all the citizens, they vote directly on laws for the good of everybody, whereas in a republic, the citizens vote for representatives who then join their other representatives to pass laws for the good of the community. The United States, for example, is a republic. So you're seeing here a big, long legacy of the Roman Empire, the idea of a republic. And we'll talk about that a lot more in our second semester when we start talking about the age of revolutions. But right now, this republic is dominated and basically exclusively belongs to the patrician class. The patricians, they're the ones voting for their own representatives. They kind of see themselves as guiding the city because the plebeians can't be trusted to rule themselves, and certainly not slaves. Slaves, big part of Roman society, but we'll talk about that. So with this overthrow of the initial Roman kings, we see the advent of the Roman Republic. And as the Republic goes on, we are going to see changes to that political structure. However, regardless of what period of the Roman Republic you are looking at, the Roman Republic overwhelmingly favors the patrician class. It's initially going to just be made up of patricians, this Roman Republic. And a major institution that will last even beyond the Republic into the empire stage is going to be the Senate. The Senate is this body in which patricians vote for representatives, and the representatives meet up in the Senate to pass laws for the good of the community. However, this kind of exclusivity of government in the hands of the patrician class, that's naturally going to lead to conflict. So we will see some rebellions, actually, and some movements to force the Senate into allowing the plebeian class to have at least some political power. So we are going to see some kind of areas where plebeians do have a say in government, and yet at the end of the day, who's really in charge of all of this? It's going to be the patricians. So one of the bodies that the Senate kind of agrees to after some debate is going to be the assembly. And the assembly is a body in which plebeians can vote directly on laws for the good of the community. The problem with the assembly, however, is that the Senate can just say no to whatever laws that the assembly passes. And as you can imagine, that's going to make the plebeians upset. So they're going to say, hey, that's not fair. let's have another political office that makes it so you can't just do whatever you want, Senate. And then eventually the Senate agrees to a elected official known as the Tribune. The Tribune is elected by the Assembly, and the Tribune has a very big amount of political power. They communicate very directly with the Senate, and the Tribune can veto laws that are passed by the Senate. The Senate, however, can override whatever the Tribune passes. So still the Senate does have a lot of power, but we are seeing some concessions being made. But a major concession that's made, and something that will apply to everyone, regardless of class, is going to be a written legal document called the 12 Tables. And you can see an artist recreation of that down here. The 12 Tables essentially are a bunch of rules that apply to everyone in Roman society, patrician, plebeian, slave alike. So we're seeing here this kind of guarantee of legal protections. There's going to be kind of guarantees of judges, of juries, that punishments are the same for everybody. So we are going to see the creation of an institution known as Roman law. And that's that idea of having kind of explicitly written out instances of any legal kind of case. So Roman law is going to be influential in future developments because it will be the basis for a lot of medieval law in Europe, in Western Europe especially. However, something that is important about the Roman Republic, and ultimately will be its downfall, spoiler alert, is that the military has a lot of influence politically in Roman society. There is an attempt to kind of control the military through an official known as the consul. There are two consuls, they're voted on by the Senate, and they lead kind of a 2-year term essentially. But the consul has military power. But as time goes on, these consuls, they're almost exclusively going to be former members of the military. So we're seeing a kind of break between the separation between the civilian government and the military government. These consuls increasingly are blending the distinction between the two. Another thing that the Senate has the power to do is that if there is an emergency, say a civil war, I don't know, the Senate can suspend all institutions of the Republic, the Assembly and the Senate, and appoint a dictator, a person with absolute power, for a period of 6 months. The problem is, what if that dictator doesn't decide to give up power willingly? Hopefully that doesn't cause problems. Let's look at Roman society. As I mentioned before, we do have this class-based system, but it's a little more complicated than just patricians and plebeians. We have patricians, they're the senators. We have the plebeians, they're more ordinary citizens. That's the key word right there, citizens. Below them are people who aren't citizens, who can't participate in politics, but they can own property, they can marry with other groups, but they don't have those explicit legal rights that the plebeians are guaranteed. And then, of course, there is the prevalence of slavery, as I'll talk about in a second. In terms of gender relations, there is a patriarchy, much like we see, well, everywhere, essentially, unfortunately. So women are going to largely be excluded from these legal rights guaranteed in the 12 Tables. However, unlike in ancient Greece, women have a lot more say economically because they can own property. They are oftentimes going to take on economic roles. I just opened up a LaCroix. Oftentimes will take economic roles. So there is a degree of some privilege, or at least some rights for women, economically speaking. But for the most part, it is a very largely patriarchal society. To contrast a little bit with ancient Greece, homosexuality, it's kind of not super tolerated in ancient Rome. We are going to see less acceptance as compared to ancient Greece, and that will be kind of more strictly enforced, this anti-homosexuality, later on in Roman history. In terms of slavery, that is a huge institution in ancient Rome. In fact, about a third of the people in Rome, the city itself, are slaves. So it's an extremely hierarchical society that while there is some allowance of political representation, that there is some economic freedom for women, we do have this prevalence of hierarchy, especially in terms of slavery. And that's actually going to cause problems later on down the road, as we'll see. The slavery part, that is. In terms of religion, think ancient Roman religion as essentially copy and paste ancient Greece and ancient Egypt. It is a polytheistic religion, much like ancient Greece, and in fact, a lot of the same Greek gods are the Roman gods, just given Latin or Roman language names. However, a big distinction between Rome and Greece in terms of their religion is that the government of Rome has a lot more of a say in religion. We do have special offices in the Roman government explicitly dedicated to religion, to maintaining the temples, for example. So there's a lot more government involvement in the ancient Roman religion. When the emperor becomes a position, the emperor is basically the head of the state religion. So everyone is kind of expected to follow this Roman religion because of how official and institutionalized it is. But another major marker of Roman society is their language, Latin, which is called a Romance language not because it's lovely, but because of the association with Rome. So Latin is going to be the written language of politics, it's the language of culture, it's the language of religion. It's going to be the basis for a lot of future Romance languages like Spanish and Portuguese. Well, we are going to see Rome expand beyond the Italian peninsula. And really, that's because of three reasons. For one thing, there's an extremely lucrative and extremely financially prosperous Mediterranean Sea trade going on. Rome wants to get in on all that. But we also have that kind of blurring of the distinctions between the military and the civilian government. We have increasingly more and more military influence on Roman politics. And as such, we're going to have a very aggressive political culture that's developing that is seeking to expand Roman economic influence and Roman political influence over neighboring communities. But we also have this kind of cultural notion of preemptive self-defense. Much like with ancient Greece, there's this notion that Latin culture, that Roman culture, and eventually Greek culture later on down the line, both of these two things, they're considered the height of human civilization. And everyone else, they're barbarians. They are uncivilized. So there's a need to civilize these barbarians, to bring them into the glorious great Roman Republic. In terms of administration, we're going to first look at the military, then we'll look at the conquered places that the military will occupy. Well, the Roman military is legendary for being, or should I say legionary? Gosh, dang it. Well, the Roman military is extremely well organized. It is going to be, this organization is going to be a major reason why it's so successful. It's divided up into different sections. And this is kind of an example of bureaucracy, in this case, military bureaucracy. We are dividing up the military into smaller, more manageable sections. And these Roman military units, they are comprised in what we call legions, and then there's basic distinctions then there's more distinctions based on that. But it's an extremely effective fighting force because of its administrative structure. And of course, we are going to see Rome expand quite a bit in its republic phase. And as such, we're going to need to create a political system to administer this big, old expansion of a republic. And we are going to see the senators of ancient Rome. They are oftentimes going to become the governors of recently conquered places. So we're seeing how there is a direct connection between the senators from Rome and the provinces of this expanding republic. But much like we've seen with the Persian Empire, the Roman Empire is going to be very much in favor of stability and continuity. They're going to say that, okay, local kings, local administration, that can all stay the same. It seemed like it was working before we got there. But ultimately, at the end of the day, all of these big picture ideas like taxes and military strategy, that all belongs to Rome. So as long as local rulers are communicating with the governor who's sent over to supervise what's going on there, as long as these local rulers are sending taxes, as long as everybody's obeying Roman laws, as long as there is no military revolts, basically, you can do what you want. So we are seeing kind of Rome try and manage a multi-ethnic empire by allowing a degree of independence to these different groups of people, as long as at the end of the day, they still respect the authority of Rome. So we're also going to see this kind of idea of including conquered people. We are going to see that prominent locals, they're going to be subdued by giving them the same political rights. So the same political rights for prominent locals as prominent locals in Rome. They can elect members to send to the to the Senate. So we are seeing that citizenship will be extended to conquered people. Now we also see a degree, and I should say degree, of religious tolerance. We are going to see sometimes even the incorporation of local ideas into Roman belief, into Roman religion. That's obviously seen when we talk about Rome invading Greece down here. It's also going to be seen when Rome invades Egypt later on. However, the only thing I want to kind of stipulate on this religious tolerance is just make sure that at the end of the day, you recognize that the Roman system of government, that's absolute, and that you shouldn't question that in any way possible. So there are going to be some wars. They don't matter all that much insofar as they lead, only insofar as they lead to the expansion of the Republic. There's the Punic Wars that's going to take out the Carthaginians, who are the major kind of rival for control of the Mediterranean Sea. Eventually, we're going to see Rome invade all these Greek-speaking areas, and Greek culture is going to become incorporated into Roman society. We're also going to see conquest of places like Spain, Hispania in Latin, and France, Gaul in ancient times. And that's going to be led by increasingly important military figures who will have political roles later on, namely a guy by the name of Julius Caesar, or Kaiser, I guess, if you're a Fallout New Vegas person, or just really like Latin history. But another thing that makes people want to join the Roman Empire, actually, is going to be, the Roman Republic, is going to be the Roman Republic's building of infrastructure. And we're going to, I guess I can't show it on YouTube really, but there's a clip that we would watch in class about the famous Monty Python sketch, What Have the Romans Ever Done for Us? And it turns out Romans did a lot, like building infrastructure, and people like that. So we're going to the Roman Republic is going to decline for a few reasons. Well, for one thing, it's an extremely unequal society, and we are going to see fluctuations in the Mediterranean economy thanks to all these wars of expansion. That's going to lead to periods of economic decline. So there is going to be increasingly calls for change in the Roman Republic. We need to break up the power of these prominent elites. We need to provide more power, more relief to everyday people, to the plebeians and the people below them, but not slaves. In addition, we are going to see kind of a growing unhappiness with the dominance of the patrician class. For one thing, among the plebeians and among the other lower classes, we are going to see kind of economic problems thanks to the existence of slavery. Slavery is going to become increasingly more prominent as Rome expands and gets more prisoners of war. And that's going to cause a huge economic decline because there's going to be massive unemployment. The best thing about slaves is you don't have to pay them. So we are going to see widespread unemployment thanks to elites preferring unfree labor, slavery, overpaying their workers. But we also see the influence of these patricians grow because they are forming huge estates called Latifundia. And these Latifundia are going to buy up little farms and make massive territorial holdings. And increasingly, that's leading to more economic tension between the plebeians and the patricians. Another major reason why we are going to see decline is we are going to see military infighting. Remember, the military has increasingly a political important role. And as such, we are going to see various military leaders try and make their own kingdoms, their own empires, their own states. So there is going to be a massive civil war in the late Republic period. And we are going to see one general in particular become the leader of the unified Roman Republic. And that's going to be a guy by the name of Julius Caesar, that guy that invaded Gaul. Well, he's going to invade Rome. And he's going to create a popular alliance between those disaffected plebeians, those poor people. And he's also going to make alliances with other prominent military leaders. And these prominent military leaders, they are sick of these patricians in charge of everything. The military should be in charge of everything. That just seems like a good idea. And eventually Caesar is going to strong arm the Senate into granting him emergency dictator powers. And well, he's not going to give up those powers. So a bunch of senators are going to assassinate him, stab him 23 times, and seemingly the Republic is saved. Hooray! Well, no. Because Caesar created a very popular successor, and that's his nephew, Octavian, also known as Augustus. So Augustus has these political connections with military leaders, and he also is very popular among Rome's urban poor. So we are going to see eventually that Octavian is going to assume absolute power. He's going to take away a lot of power from the Senate, and he's going to establish the Roman Empire. So you should be able to identify some features of the Roman Republic, its political system, and then why is it declining? Well, let's look at the Roman Empire. And as you can see on those dates right there, it's going to get a little complicated, especially by the end. But the Roman Empire, we know, and most historians agree, is going to start after Augustus takes power. So let's look at the government of ancient Rome's empire. And we're going to look at how things are staying the same and how things are changing. So let's first look at how things are staying the same. Well, the Senate is still going to exist. Basic administration of the empire is going to exist. Local rule in the kind of empire's provinces, that's still going to be respected. We still have these governors who are in charge of these places. The Senate's still also made up of prominent patricians. But we're also going to see kind of a continuity in the application of Roman law. Roman law is going to spread throughout the Roman Empire. It's going to make its way all over the parts that Rome touches. So as such, Roman law will become a major legal influence for these post-Roman Empire countries that will emerge. So self-rule is still a thing. We are going to see the same elites still in power throughout ancient Rome. However, what is changing? Well, namely what is changing is who is in charge. Who has absolute power? It isn't shared anymore within the Senate. The person that makes all the laws for society is going to be the emperor, who's also known as the Principate, essentially the principal citizen, the first citizen. So we are going to see the assembly being abolished, and we are going to see kind of the political power, the political representation of the people being held in the hands of one person. Theoretically, the emperor is picked by the Senate, but that's not really true, because we are going to see the emperor basically supersede whatever the Senate does. But we're also going to see more social mobility in the Roman Empire. We are going to see a new class known as the Equites. They're kind of rich property owners, but they aren't a part of the patrician class. They're going to increasingly become the government workers in the Roman Empire. So class mobility is something that does exist in the Roman Empire, as expressed through this more important political position given to the Equites. So what remained the same? What changed in the Roman Empire between the Republic and the Empire? You should be able to identify that. Well, let's look at advancements in society. And you can see in this map right here how flippin' big the Roman Empire is going to get. Well, we are going to see the Roman Empire greatly expand the territory that was gained by the Republic. We are going to see the Roman Empire be one of the biggest in world history. It's going to stretch from Portugal, modern day Portugal, obviously, all the way to Persia, modern day Iran. It's stretching east and west this far. It's stretching north and south from Scotland all the way down here to Sudan. It's incorporating parts of what will become Eastern Europe. It's got parts of Germany, modern day Germany, and France and Spain, North Africa, Israel and Palestine. It's a huge empire. And we are going to see in this empire the creation of a unifying infrastructure project. And that is a huge road system known as the Appian Way. And the Appian Way is going to provide a lot of overland trade in the Roman Empire. We are connecting parts of Central Europe into the Mediterranean Sea economic community. So as such, we're going to see an expansion of trade beyond just the Mediterranean Sea coast, further and further inland, not just in Europe, but in Africa as well. But we're also going to see the spread or diffusion, using a term, the spread of Roman culture through a process known as Romanization. And that's essentially going to be with the intent of creating a unified imperial culture. So we are going to see kind of the promotion of Latin as a language of the Roman Empire. We're going to see the creation of Roman temples to Roman gods across the Roman Empire. We're seeing similar city layouts to across the Roman Empire. So a lot of the kind of cities that will become major centers of Europe and Africa and Asia will have roots with the ancient Romans. However, Romanization and the effect that it has, the success of it, is going to be more influential in the western part of the empire. The eastern part is mostly going to remain very influenced by Greek or Hellenistic culture. So Latin is not going to be a big thing in the east. So if we're thinking ahead, we're already starting to see cultural divisions between the east and the west. Well, initially, the Roman Empire is going to enjoy a period of peace and prosperity known as the Pax Romana. It is the height of stability and culture in the Roman Empire. We're going to see trade flourish. There's a unified empire that's domestically protected by its very strong army. And we are going to see, as a result of this Romanization effort, the building of cities that follow the Roman idea of urban planning. We're going to see the creation of huge monuments, like the Colosseum in Rome. We have this theater that I believe is in the Middle East. We're seeing the building of huge monuments. We're seeing the advent of painting as a Western idea. We're seeing improvements to Greek statue making. And we're also going to see kind of why all of these big monuments are being built. And it's going to be this idea of bread and circuses. This idea that in order to create a stable society, we need to keep people happy. We need to build these massive stadiums, these colosseums. We need to have free food so that there isn't much class division, so that there isn't a demand for a rebellion, for a change of government. So the reason why we see this Pax Romana is that we have kind of a stable political system. The emperor is clearly in charge. We have a military that's very successful, but we also have a government that is going to reduce instances of class division thanks to appealing to the lowest common denominator through entertainment and through free food. Let's look at urban society in ancient Rome, because this is the most interesting, but it's not where a majority of Romans actually live. And we'll talk about that in a second. Well, cities, as in any place in the ancient world, they are centers of culture and government, and ancient Rome is no exception. But the big kind of legacy of ancient Rome is going to be this idea of urban planning, explicitly making areas for public infrastructure. This is going to borrow heavily from Greek architecture, and this is an example of diffusion, of incorporating, or of the spread of Greek ideas. And kind of how the Romans apply this stuff is an example of syncretism. It's combining Roman architecture with Greek architecture to make something new. And the urban planning that the Romans will pioneer, that's going to be the basis for a lot of future cities, especially in Europe, but also in the Middle East as well. For one thing, we're going to see the building of aqueducts, bringing water, clean water into cities. We're seeing baths, public sanitation, and sewers. We're also seeing the kind of establishment of the forum. This is the main economic center and the center of public life. That kind of sees this breakdown of class divisions. Rich people are there, poor people are there. We're also seeing the building of huge stadiums, of amphitheaters, of racetracks called circuses. We are going to see this have a political effect, however, of reducing conflict within the empire, making poor people happy by giving them entertainment. That's free, that's subsidized by the government, but also free food too. And in these cities, we are mostly going to see an economy based on trade, based on manufacturing, especially luxury items like glass and metal. Did I literally just copy and paste this? LOL. Well, this is what a city looks like. This is ancient Rome right here. So you can see these massive monument structures that have the impact of creating a stronger urban society. We have an aqueduct right here. We have the Colosseum, which still stands today, the Circus Maxima. We have the theater. We have different institutions that are designed to promote stability, designed to promote economic development, like the Forum, for example. In terms of the countryside, this is where a majority of people live. And this is going to be the basis for the economy. And that's mostly going to be around agriculture. And this is going to be very important when we consider what comes after Rome in Europe. Well, we have to talk about the Latifundia again. Because remember that these Roman elites, these patrician elites, who get their titles, who get their privileges through birth, through their family, they own really big plots of land, especially outside of the cities, further and further away from urban centers. And these latifundia, they're mostly worked by slaves, but for free people, workers work on that land in exchange for protection from their landowners. So these landowners have a lot of local influence over their working population. But as these latifundia expand further and further away from Rome, further away from the urban center of the empire, these landowners, they're increasingly having more political influence over their communities. So if we're thinking about the eventual end of the Roman Empire and the transition to the Middle Ages, this is really the basis for what will become medieval European feudalism. So as latifundia become more and more politically independent from the Roman Empire, we are seeing the development of feudalism in the edges of the empire, i.e., in places like modern-day France, in places like modern-day Germany, and modern-day England. And yet, Slavery is still an important part of the empire, especially closer to the imperial center. However, an argument that historians are going to make about slavery in the Roman period is that the reliance on slaves is going to stifle incentive to create labor-saving devices. So we are going to see, because of the reliance on slavery, a lack of technological developments. And that's going to be a major reason why Europe is in stark contrast with the technological developments we'll see in China and in India. But as I kind of alluded to earlier, as you get farther and farther away from Rome itself, there is decreased feeling that you actually belong to the Roman Empire. Sure, there are some good things. I mean, all this architecture and prosperity and trade, but in terms of listening to some authority that's far away, well, as the Roman Empire declines, these people on the edges of the empire feel more and more legitimized to break away from it, to form their own kingdoms, their own political systems. So that's alluding to the Middle Ages a little bit, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But another major development that will occur during this Pax Romana is going to be the rise of Christianity. So let's look at that. Well, let's first look at the political context of Christianity. Well, one of the provinces of ancient Rome is Judea. This is mostly ancient Israel. This is modern-day Israel and Palestine, centered in the city of Rome. There's a Roman governor, but there are local elites who are in charge of day-to-day things, making sure that the day-to-day people are listening to the Romans. However, there is a tension between the Jews, the locals, and the Romans. And one of those big reasons why is the religious aspect. Jews are monotheistic. They don't recognize the divinity of the Roman emperor. Whereas the Romans, they recognize the legitimacy and divinity of the Roman emperor. But there's also a bit of a class division that's going on in ancient Judea, not just between the Jews and the Romans, but within the Jewish community as well, between the temple elites and everyday people. So in this context, we are going to see the rise of a historic figure known as Jesus. You might have heard of him. And this is kind of just going to be a review of Jesus as a historical figure without kind of religious connotations associated with him. But who is Jesus? Well, he's going to be an example of that rabbinical tradition. Remember, these rabbis in early Judaism, they're mostly from the lower classes. They're mostly kind of giving a more personal interpretation of Judaism. And Jesus is an example of this. He is going to interpret Jewish scripture, and he is going to make a kind of sect of Judaism that's more appealing to the common person, that's more appealing to poor people, that's more appealing to slaves even, and that's also appealing to women. Women have a lot of high positions in Jesus's early ministry. So it's a very appealing religious idea. However, if you put it in the context of all this class division, that's going to spell some trouble, especially because Jesus is going to argue in kind of vague terms that we can establish a kingdom of heaven, a perfect classless society on earth, in which God is the only authority, one God. And that God isn't the Romans per se. So the Romans increasingly are going to be hostile to Jesus's followers. We are going to see kind of this idea that having a kingdom of heaven on earth, that's not very Roman. Jesus is going to be crucified, which is a punishment reserved for political prisoners. However, Jesus's followers are going to remain, and they are going to spread his teachings through trade routes that the Romans are connecting Judea to. So we are going to see these followers of Jesus establish communities across the Mediterranean Sea. And when you see kind of the spreading of Jesus's teachings, there's a bit of a telephone game going on. They're slowly transitioning Jesus's initial teachings, that's a form of Judaism, into into their own independent religion. And eventually these followers, they're going to kind of have this belief that Jesus is the Messiah, that he is the Son of God, and he is here to bring a change on earth for the religious salvation of people. And eventually Jesus' followers will codify this into a series of books known as the Gospels by 70 CE about. And when you have that, when you have a distinct religious text from Jewish scripture, that's when we have Christianity becoming a full-fledged religion. But spoiler alert, Christianity is going to become the official religion of the Roman Empire. But how is that going to happen? Well, it's largely because of a figure called Paul. Paul is a Jewish Roman. He's an elite. And initially, he's involved in persecuting Christians. Christians are viewed by the Romans as being heretical because they don't recognize the religious authority of the emperor. So we do see persecution of Christians, and Paul is involved in that. But he's going to have a conversion experience. And as a member of the Roman elite, he's going to say, I want my fellow elites to be involved in this religion. So Paul is going to begin a process of making Christianity respectable to Roman elites. He is going to kind of clarify some things. He's going to say that slavery is justified thanks to Jesus's teachings. He's going to say that women deserve to be in a lower place in society. He's going to say that having wealth is a sign that God loves you. So he's making Christianity respectable to Roman elites. And as such, we are going to see a growing acceptance of Christianity among the people with political say in Roman society. But on top of this, Paul is going to make Christianity a lot more appealing to other groups of people outside of Judea, because Jews already have their religion. However, if you speak to Roman elites who aren't Jewish, well, it's easier to talk to them about Jesus, about Christianity. So we are going to see how Paul is making Christianity into an acceptable, according to the Romans, mainstream religion. But let's look at how the Roman Empire will decline. And let's look at kind of transitions that will happen as a result of imperial decline. Well, we are going to see the end of the Pax Romana thanks to an event known as the 3rd century crisis. And essentially, the 3rd century crisis is when we are going to see decreased revenue for the Roman imperial state. But remember, the Roman Empire is huge. So as revenue goes down, costs are going up. So increasingly, there is financial problems within the Roman Empire. But political systems are not going to help with all of this, because we are going to see a series of really bad rulers in the Roman Empire. They include figures like Nero, this guy with the neck beard right there, and also Caligula. So increasingly, Rome doesn't have good leaders to respond to internal problems. And as such, we are going to see a weakening of the commitment to the idea of a unified Roman Empire. These major Latifundia leaders, these major Latifundian nobles, essentially, they're increasingly not listening to what the Roman Empire has to say. So there are going to be some attempts at reform in the Roman Empire. There's one solution to make 4 emperors who rule at the same time, essentially. It's called the Tetrarchy. But naturally, that's not going to work out all that well. So eventually, we are going to see an attempt to stabilize the Roman Empire in the figure of Emperor Constantine. And Constantine is going to do 2 important things for the Roman Empire in order to try and save it. For one thing, he is going to say that Christianity is now the official religion of the Roman Empire. He has a religious vision at one point. He paints the cross, the main symbol of Christianity, onto his shields, and then he wins, and then he converts to Christianity. But why does he do that? And why does that help, in his opinion, stabilize the Roman Empire? Well, it's creating a state religion that is going to be accepted by these elites in Roman society that are increasingly appealing to Christianity. It's an attempt to get everybody on board with the same religion. So Constantine is going to be influential in spreading Christianity. And in order to have a unified religion everybody follows, he's going to clarify Christian theology. He's going to get together all the religious leaders together in one spot at the Council of Nicaea, and he's going to have them work out a shared set of beliefs that everyone in the Roman Empire will follow. So this making Christianity the state religion is an attempt to culturally and religiously unify a very diverse empire. But the other thing that Constantine is going to do, and seemingly this is trying to help the Roman Empire, is actually moving the capital away from Rome to Byzantium. And he's going to name it after himself. It becomes Constantinople. But why does he do this, and why does he think this provides stability? Well, for one thing, his major political enemy at the time is the Sassanid Empire over here. So he wants to be closer to the fighting, to have his military and political center be closer to the fighting. So you don't need to have all this long road walking to get to where the fighting's happening. This is also where a lot of trade is happening, especially overland trade with places like the Middle East, with places as far as China, for example. But also, Constantinople is fresh ground for Christian converts. There's not a lot of Judaism, there's not a lot of, or there is kind of not a single unified religion there. Let's make that a Christian center. So mainly the move to Constantinople is to make the empire a lot more easy to manage. However, that's not going to be the case because there still is the Western Empire to think about. So eventually after Constantine, we are going to see the splitting up of the Roman Empire into two parts, the West and the East. The West centered in Rome, the East centered in Constantinople. And the Eastern Roman Empire is going to actually do very fine. A lot of the resources that are going to be generated in the Roman Empire, they're going to go mostly to Constantinople and not Rome. So Constantinople and the Eastern Roman Empire, that's going to survive quite a long time. It's going to last even until into our content for world history, until 1453. However, the West, that's going to be the one that declines very rapidly. And let's look at that. Well, the Roman Empire in the West is going to fall by 476 CE. And that's mostly because that the center of the economic activity in the empire is moved away to Constantinople. Rome is left in the dust. There's going to be a lot of economic tensions, leading to internal rebellions. There's not enough money to keep up this bread and circus routine. There's going to be epidemics, there's disease. You could also, some historians speculate that the fact that there's lead pipes led to a decrease in mental capacity. That's a different thing. But the main kind of nail in the coffin is going to be invasions from outsiders. Increasingly, we have a weakened political system because the center of the empire essentially moved away. We have corrupt leaders, and this is going to be perfect ground for invasions. We are going to see different groups of people, groups in Central Europe called the Germanic Societies. These include the Goths and the Visigoths and the Vandals and the Franks. They're going to invade. We have Eastern European groups. We have Central Asian nomads even, the Huns invading. But these people, these groups of barbarians, when they take over the Western Roman Empire, they're going to carve out for themselves their own kingdoms. And they are going to actually look at the Roman Empire, and they're going to look at its past especially, and they're going to say, those times are good. Let's try and emulate that. So they're going to build their structures, their kingdoms, based on Roman traditions. They're first going to adopt Christianity, and they are going to model their new societies after Rome. They're going to continue Roman law. They're going to continue that Latifundia system that will eventually translate into feudalism. So we are going to see the creation of independent kingdoms ruled over by these invaders. They're adopting Roman ideas, but they're making politically independent societies that are mostly run through feudalism. And this is the major hallmark of the medieval age in Europe, as we will talk about in our first unit. But we see the origins of feudalism with the decline of the Western Roman Empire. But why is Rome so gosh dang important? Well, look at these maps right here, and I want you to guess why that is. Pause the video. Well, welcome back. Yes, right here, this represents the linguistic legacy of the Roman Empire. This is the spread of Romance languages. You got French, you got Spanish, you got Portuguese, you got Romanian. All these languages, they all have the same basis in Latin. And this map right here, this is the map of Christianity. So Rome is going to be very much a model for future governments in world history. Not just the empire, but also, as we'll see later on, the republic. Latin, of course, is a major legacy, not only in terms of language for these Romance languages, but also in terms of religion as well, because Christianity, especially Catholicism, is going to take on Latin as their language of ritual. We have Roman art and architecture. This is held up as the supreme form of art throughout Western society. But also, of course, is Christianity. And I want us to conclude on one final thought. When the Roman Empire is declining in the West, all of these political institutions are in chaos. We have the breakup of the empire into different smaller kingdoms. The one institution that remains stable is the Christian church, centered in Rome. And it's for this reason of stability in a time of chaos that Christianity is going to direct a lot of influences in European society. So that's the wrong question. Gosh dang it. It's supposed to say, what are some legacies of the ancient Romans, of ancient Rome, and why did it decline? I apologize very much. Well, thank you very much for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Have a great day, wherever you are, whenever you are. God bless. Or I shouldn't say that. All right, well, stop video.